John Moffett has years of experience in public affairs and governmental relations. Now he wants to take that experience to Columbia to serve the constituents of House District 110. I talk one-on-one with the Democratic candidate for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. John Moffett, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Quintin. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you have a career in government relations, campaign, political management, and of course, obviously politics as a whole. Now you're a Democratic candidate for South Carolina House District 110, and I think I'm sitting in parts of it right now. But after redistricting, what parts does that cover?
Yeah, so it was redistricted 2 years ago, and it's right now House District 110 is downtown, everything south of Calhoun. So that's the easy part. You just draw that line across downtown, down south of Calhoun on the peninsula. Mount Pleasant, it goes along the river. It includes Ion and Hobcaw. Yes. It goes up towards Wando Terminal, and then it sort of wiggles its way over. It touches 526 just barely, and then wiggles its way down to the old village. It uses McCants and then Simmons as a border there. And then it includes everything west of that line. And then in James Island, just a little chunk of James Island, it's just over Harborview Road, but kind of follows Harborview Road down to Fort Johnson and then out to the water. And then the tiniest sliver of West Ashley, the Crescent, just the neighborhood of the Crescent. So it's when you look at it on a map, it looks like there's more water in it than there is actual land.
Right.
I had when I started this, I said I was going to campaign from a boat, but I haven't been able to do that yet. So, maybe next time we'll go up Shem Creek and we'll be on a boat doing this.
Well, there you go. And shout out to all my friends over at First Baptist on McCants Drive. I love that church immensely. Great people out there in the old village. But let me ask you this. Obviously, you have a career in obviously politics. So why this particular seat? Why now? Yeah.
So, at the end of 2023, I sort of looked at, I said to myself, just personally, that Charleston and the Lowcountry have done so much for me throughout my life. I went to college here. I've lived here. I now have a newborn daughter here. That it was time for me to give something back to the community. And, I looked at ways to get involved with charities, and other organizations. And, I wasn't expecting to run for office. And I as much as I've worked sort of in the public affairs sphere for a long time, I never really thought I'd run. But then, the chair of the Democratic Party, Sam Scarton, came and talked to me about it. And I said, well, if I'm going to run, I want to make sure it's for the office where I'll be able to make the most difference. And I looked around, and the more I noticed, the more I looked at our elected leaders, the more I noticed that at the state level, and particularly at the state house level, we had a leader in Tom Hartnett that didn't seem to be, his values didn't seem to be, the way he was legislating did not seem to be lining up with the values of his voters and the way that his voters would have the values of those of the Lowcountry and of Charleston. And one issue is that, by and large, people don't really know who is representing them at the state house because it's a relatively quiet position. You're up there voting for the rest of the state, and you're much more in tune with what's going on at the top of the ticket, whether that be at the presidential level or Senate or national, the federal Senate level, the Senate level, or the federal House of Representatives, or really just your local politicians, so your mayors, right? So, but at the state house level, people are. It's just less of a known position. So, I thought that's an issue. I think that when a community is represented by somebody and they don't know who that is, that's an issue. So, I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and we've been at it now for about 8 months, and 1 week to go. And I think we've put our best foot forward.
And of course, a lot of people will probably see your commercials on television. I know I've seen them personally in the past couple of days. But going back to Tom Hartnett, incidentally, when he first ran 2 years ago, he basically decided not to do an interview with me. So I decided not to do an interview with him this time around. There's no need to waste the voters' time on him. But let me ask you this: how does his values match the values of the voters in the district?
If I misstated, I apologize. I said that his voting record does not match the values of the voters in the district. And by that I mean,
Yes, sir.
by that I mean we have real issues in Charleston. I firmly believe that the Lowcountry is the greatest place in the world to live. I mean, there's nowhere else where you have beautiful weather most of the time. You have wonderful people, such rich history, rich culture, and access to natural beauty all around. I don't believe that comes together many other places in the world. But the problem is we have real challenges in protecting them. Obviously, we all know that we have climate threats. We face worse and worse flooding every single day. We have infrastructure issues. We have rising costs of living. But instead of addressing those issues and really finding bipartisan creative ways with broad stakeholder buy-in to solve those issues, Tom Hartnett has really proven to just be a rubber stamp for the Freedom Caucus, for the far right wing of his party. And he is more focused because of that, on taking votes and voting the wrong way on big social issues like the 6-week abortion bill, like the permitless open carry, to the point where now we live in a place where a woman can't make decisions about her reproductive rights, but a teenager can walk down the street with a gun in his or her hands down King Street and nobody can stop them. So, that's just not a world that I want to live in. It's not a world that I want my baby daughter to grow up in. And, that's sort of what I mean when his voting record's not lining up with the values of our district, because I believe if you ask people all around the district, and I have, they'd agree with me. And, yes, that's really kind of why I threw my hat in the ring.
Well, let me jump into the topic, the big issues right now. And you talked about it, abortion. People in the state that I talked to ask us, if a woman is forced to have a baby by the South Carolina legislator and dies in childbirth, should the state compensate her family for the value of her life?
I think that's a ridiculous premise. I think that, government should not be in the business of making the decisions about a woman's health care in the first place. So, if that's something that that falls in the laps of state legislatures, is going to fall squarely in the lap of the GOP. That is on the GOP. If and when somebody dies because they are forced to have the baby that they take to term, an unwanted pregnancy, I believe that falls squarely in the GOP's lap. That's going to fall squarely on the shoulders of my opponent Tom Hartnett and others who voted for that bill. I'm not focused. I'm focused on the main issue, which is that we should not be in the business of making those decisions for women in the first place. And any abortion ban is an infringement on rights, in my view. And I look forward to getting up to Columbia and preventing further restrictions on women's reproductive health at every turn that I can. So, yeah.
And I hope to get a representative of the Freedom Caucus and the GOP back on Quintin's Post to talk about that, to get their side of the story.
Yep.
But should South Carolina lawmakers, John, be able to consider punishing abusers with involuntary vaccinities instead of punishing victims with involuntary pregnancies?
I'm not in the business of who we're going to punish and who we're not going to. I am more focused on expanding freedoms of individuals and expanding the freedoms of women, particularly from a reproductive rights standpoint. I'm not here to play executioner. I'm not here to play judge. I'm here to play legislator. And as a legislator, I will always vote to protect the freedoms of women's reproductive health.
Well, let me ask you this. If a woman wants to reverse, obviously, the vaccinity, should they alert the local authorities?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. If a woman wants to
if they want to reverse the vaccinity, should they alert the local authorities about it?
Look, right now, I mean, I don't know that that we should live in a world where they don't need to alert the authorities when they're doing anything with their body, right? So I just don't think that that's an issue that we need to even be chiming in on as government officials.
Well, let me ask you this. If abortion is legal, why does anybody have to be informed about that?
If abortion is legal, why does anybody need to be informed about that?
Yes, sir.
Well, abortion right now in South Carolina is not legal. And so we need to, what I'm focused on is creating an environment where abortion is legal, where a woman has the right without government infringement to make choices about her own health care.
Oh, okay, let me ask you this then. How many rapes and incest have actually happened per day here in South Carolina?
How many rapes and sorry, what?
And incest here in South Carolina, how many of those have happened over the past couple of per
I,
day?
I, I, I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that we need to is that in all cases, if a woman has an unwanted pregnancy, it is not the government's business of making the choice for them of when and how they can have that baby. They need to have that baby.
How long should a woman's rape kit sit on the shelf?
Again, Quintin, I don't know the answer of how long a women's rape kit should sit on the shelf. I'm just, again, look, I'm for every single possibility that we can to expand women's rights for healthcare.
What restrictions, if any, would you have in your abortion bill if afforded the opportunity to actually introduce one in the House of Representatives?
But the only restrictions would be restrictions on the GOP to restrict a woman's reproductive rights. I do not believe that this is a government issue. Just like, you make choices in your everyday life. I trust women to make these decisions, and I believe that no matter what, this is something we should get our government out of women's lives and not the other way around.
Do you support a woman's right to partial birth abortion?
I'm not familiar with partial birth abortion. What that is.
Okay, let me ask you this. A lot of people that I talk to say elective late term abortion does not exist. So do you oppose that is a late term ban?
Look, nobody has an abortion late flippantly. Nobody. By that point, a woman has picked out a name. They have picked out many times a crib. They designed a nursery. And I've just gone through designing all this, and I cannot imagine making the decision that some women have to make. But there are medical reasons that women have to have abortions late in term. And by that moment, again, we cannot, as legislators, be making that decision for them. We cannot force somebody, particularly when it is unhealthy to the mother or unhealthy to others, to carry that baby to term. That is a backwards way of thinking, and that is the antithesis of what we stand for as Americans and as South Carolinians. But when it comes to freedom and freedom to make one's own decisions.
How many women in District 110 have actually opposed abortion?
I don't know how many have opposed abortion, but to me, it's an overwhelmingly overwhelmingly pro-choice district. We've seen the momentum that this campaign has generated, just based off of the abortion issue. I've talked to people on the doors every single day. This is still very much an issue that is extremely important to women, and they're going to make sure that their voices are heard at the polls. Already, but on November 5th.
What are those other issues that are pressing right now in House District 110?
The other issues? Sorry?
Yes, sir.
Like I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, look, so many people are concerned about righting the ship when it comes to the abortion stuff, when it comes to the gun bills, and then focusing on the issues that matter to our everyday lives. The bread and butter issues, as they say, and also the issues that are threatening the Lowcountry and our wonderful place that we have here. So, I see more and more people talk about traffic and infrastructure. I see more and more people continue to talk about flooding. The age-old story that Charleston is a donor city or donor district that gives more money to the state than it does by proportion get back. I don't see a lot of our legislators doing a lot about that. And I don't think that a lot of people understand exactly what it means. A lot of people talk about how much accommodations tax we're paying up, right, and how little we get back. It's actually untrue. The accommodations tax, there's the local, the county, and then the state. We by and large do get that proportionally back for us. Where we really fall short is we send an astronomical amount of sales tax, and I don't know the exact number, but we send an astronomical amount of sales tax to Columbia, which then gets dispersed amongst the rest of the state disproportionately. Right. And what happens is, because we're not seeing that amount of money, that proportionate amount of money come back to us, we fall short in many of our institutions and many of our efforts to create to sustain the great place where we live. I'll give you an example. as many people know, Charleston is in the precipice of a boom right now. I mean, we have Union Pier going up. We have all kinds of development, for better or for worse. We've got, potentially a 526 issue, depending on how voters vote. But we don't have the police infrastructure right now to take care of all that. We're going to have more people coming in, whether we like it or not. We're going to have more people staying here. But right now,
yes,
part of our police force is actually funded by charitable contributions, right? That's unacceptable. We need to expand our police funding by bringing back more tax dollars and focusing on, making sure that the very things that keep us safe, our first responders, are properly funded and taken care of. And that's something that I haven't seen Tom Hartnett do any of. He claims to represent our first responders, our police. He hits me on being anti-police for some reason, even though I clearly state I'm not, and I've proven I'm not. But he can lie all he wants, but until he shows us some action on the actual subject, then I'm going to keep speaking my truth and calling out the lies.
Let me take you to Union Pier. As you know, Lowcountry businessman Ben Navarro has agreed to purchase the Union Pier, according to WCBD. The 70-acre property here on the peninsula, which actually currently serves as a terminal for the cruise ships right down the street here, is slated to be redeveloped after the South Carolina Ports Authority previously announced it would not renew the cruise line's contract for that space. The new mayor, Charleston Mayor William Cogswell Jr., has actually outlined his vision for the property prior to the sale that included providing public access to the waterfront, adding significant green space, utilizing lower density and height restrictions for the buildings, and of course, affordability. Just last night, right across the street here, the Charleston County School Board just passed the TIF, vote there. So let me ask you this. What new development height concerns do you have right now, John?
Height concerns?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I mean, look, I look, Charleston's skyline is absolutely beautiful and is what makes it a wonderful city. I will say that plenty of cities have height restrictions and they find ways to mitigate it. I don't think that that a height restriction on a city can last forever. I think that there should always be tweaks to it and ways that we can preserve our skyline and our public safety and our from an environmental standpoint preserve be able to protect our city. But at the same time, if we can do it in a sustainable way and we can augment it or amend it, I think that's fine. Look, I think you touched on the broader project of Union Pier, and I try not to get into hyper local politics because I view myself as a legislator being a shepherd of funds for local projects. So, one thing that we've lacked at the state level, when I talk to people in City Hall, when I talk to business owners, is a clear vision from federal to state to county to local. And there's a break at the state level there where, many times you have the mayor and the county on the same page, but they need to advocate for funding, let's just say for appropriations funding down for infrastructure projects down to the state level. Union Pier would have been one of them, but it's just like there's a void at the state level. I plan on being that shepherd of appropriation funding down towards, from the state level and sort of I will be there to meet with city and county leaders whenever they need me. I can provide counsel, but then as soon as they come to me with a project, I will do my best, as long as I agree with that project, to make sure it's funded from the state level as much as I can.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. If you put a TIF on Union Pier, how long will it actually be before the city of Charleston sees any tax revenues from this?
You'd have to ask the mayor exactly what the timeline is on Union Pier there. Again, like I'm for the TIF as long as it is not taking dollars from public education. I trust Mayor Cogswell on this issue.
But then, would a TIF actually be a crutch to development in that area?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think the answer is obvious that the TIF is a crutch for development in that area because that's what we're using to fund, a lot of the project, right? So, you can't sit here and say that developers aren't benefiting from this, at all. But the question is it unfair? And I don't believe so. I think that this will create, tremendous amounts of economic development. I think it's being done in a sustainable way. I always, I have concerns about all major development. But I think when you weigh the pros and cons, I think it's a good project.
Well, let me ask you this then, John. What integrated planning and urban landscape design should be ideal to actually fix the potential flooding around the corner there?
Yeah. Well, look, sorry, I dropped my phone there. Sorry, I didn't get to tell you all that I'm in my car
happens.
Right now. I'm door knocking.
Yes, sir.
I'm door knocking. Look, I think that the city is county are working well on a lot of the floodplain mitigation projects. I mean, you saw a pump station that's about to go up at, I believe, King and UG Street.
Right.
It looks absolutely beautiful. The drawings of it. I'd love to see more sort of visually green spaces like that also help with flood mitigation. At the end of the day, we want to keep our city dry, so it may not always be pretty, but we're going to need to get this squared away one way or another. On the flooding issue, where I can sort of be helpful from the state level. Many people don't understand or don't know that so many of our roads, even at the city and county level, are still owned by the state.
Right.
And one thing that I've always found that seems obvious that a state legislator should do is work with the Department of Transportation to create a standard for our state-owned roads. And by doing that, and by standard, I mean a standard for flooding, right, and flood resiliency. And by doing so, you then can create one that the city and the county can mimic with their own roads, right? And again, that's just something I haven't seen Tom Hartnett do. I haven't seen in a while. But it just seems so obvious to me that the parts of land that as a legislator I will have sort of jurisdiction over, I would at least I'd be doing everything I can to make sure that those are passable and those are not flooding at the rate we've seen.
Going back to that and sticking with that, should there be more open space for that particular area at Union Pier?
Yeah, I'd like to see as much open space as possible. We want to see public access to the water. We want to see I want to make sure that we're seeing at least some, not all private space along the water, because one thing that we lack in Charleston is public access to the water. I mean, we have the Battery, which is beautiful, but beyond that, lots of times you have to go out to you got to go out to James Island or the beach or whatever. I think this should be done with all of the community in mind. I think that everything's better than the cruise ships though. So the cruise ships I think for the longest time have blocked a vital part of the river and of the water access that Charlestonians and residents of the Lowcountry deserve to be able to access. So I think that public space and public access should be a huge portion of the Union Pier project.
Now, as you just mentioned, those cruise ships, most of those cruise ships will be, the Carnival cruise ship will be gone in the next couple of years to make way for Union Pier. Should that go up to North Charleston so that they can have an economic development boom there? As long as it's done in a sustainable way that's not going to, create too much water, maritime traffic, and can you hear me? You good? Oh yeah. Just the Wi-Fi going in now, but I can still hear you.
Yeah. Okay. As long as it's not going to create, too much maritime traffic, it's going to be done in a sustainable and smooth way, which I'm not positive it can be. It may take some more dredging, which can be, a pain sometimes. But I obviously, I want to see North Charleston thrive as much as anybody else. So if it's, again, it's one of those things where a lot of legislators don't do this. A lot of elected officials don't do this. You really have to weigh the pros and cons. I'd have to look at what the economic development numbers would look like versus what the impact to the local both economy and landscape would be to continue to have cruise ships going up and down the Cooper River. But it's something I'd be willing to talk about.
So what is the economic development from Carnival cruise ships right now?
Well, I mean, I was just down at the market today, and you see the people that come off of those cruise ships. Without looking up at the water, when a cruise ship is there. And look, I'm not gonna lie, that's great. I mean, I love the fact that there are tourists coming into the town and spending their money and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, that water, it's been too long since the residents of Charleston and the residents of the Lowcountry have had access to that water. So, or access to that waterfront. And I think it's time that we made that happen. So I'm I'm like a lot of Charlestonians, where I'm going to be happy to see those Carnival cruise ships go.
Oh yeah, don't eat that.
I don't know who you're talking to, but I
Oh, the
agree.
dog. I'm sorry. There's a dog here at the park. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But let me
yeah,
go back. You talked earlier about those. Obviously, a lot of these roads around here. I mean, you look at right here, George Street. That's probably a city street. You look at,
yes.
Anson Street's probably a city street. Calhoun's probably a state road.
Yeah.
What 10-year plan would you submit to the Department of Transportation to actually correct the backlog of maintenance and actually fix roads in your district?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a huge backlog, right? I would like to see the return of ownership of a lot of the roads eventually back to counties and cities. But until we get to that point, we've got a massive backlog, and that means beyond that, I mean, like, look, what in terms of what I would do to help ease that backlog is, I just work every day with DOT. I'd love to serve on the transportation committee. I'd love to be able to oversee a lot of these issues. But my real focus would be making sure those roads are passable, finding, economic and sustainably and new creative ways to make sure those roads are passable in the meantime. We have a lot of projects, including 526, that are going to take a while, but in the meantime, we can't forget about things that aren't included in the Mark Clark extension package.
In that package, should there be some flyovers in your area?
Okay, so I have kept a very my stance on the 526 extension is not going to change, so I won't really comment on this, because I believe that the ballot referendum is the greatest, most pure form of democracy that we have. And I don't believe that it's a candidate's job to try to influence, to exert my will on the voters in terms of this issue. My job will start after the referendum passes or doesn't pass, and that once that happens, I'll either have to figure out ways in terms of workforce or make or further funding to make sure that the project goes off on time and is runs in a smooth way, or in an environmentally economic way, or if it doesn't pass, finding other ways to alleviate traffic and infrastructure. So all I'll say there is that I respect the ballot referendum process. I wish we had an easier way to have ballot referendums at the state level, because what we would do is then we'd put abortion on the ballot again, or not again, we put abortion on the ballot the first time. But unfortunately, we don't have that. But right now, in terms of the 526 issue, I'm letting it play out, and then my focus is on the day after it either passes or doesn't pass, and finding ways to bring the community together around either making sure it goes off smoothly or fixing these issues one way or another.
Well, let me ask you this, Dan. What infrastructure projects are in works right now for your District 110?
Well, you have the Union Pier project. You've got other, as I mentioned, the pump stations. But 526 is the really big one, and there are projects, over on both in West Ashley and in Mount Pleasant that are part of it, that are beyond just 526 extension, that are part of the Mark Clark extension projects that the state's been the county's been a little bit vague on exactly which ones there are, but there are a good number of them. And the other thing I'll say is that from a federal perspective, I have a long career in working with federal entities to get funding down to state and local levels, and there's still a lot of money that can be brought from the federal government down to the state, and then down to the county and to the city, that would allow us to complete a lot of the projects that we need to do without actually spending state funds. So that's something that I haven't seen, and I'd like to do, or I'd like to take advantage of as a legislator, particularly being a liaison from the federal government down to the county and to the city.
With that referendum, is there any vague language in that particular referendum that you hope they could have changed before it actually been placed on the ballot?
Yes, I mean it's they on the ballot, they really should have listed out specific projects that they're going to carry out beyond just the 526 extension. There are, I know that you can go online and you can see them all. I wish that they had been more clear. Having said that, yes, I have clearly I have hesitations about the environmental impacts, but I also understand that I'm campaigning on on infrastructure dollars and infrastructure projects to alleviate traffic. So the one way or the other, I'm going to have to deal with this. I'm excited to, but again, I'm going to let the voters decide.
Well, I want some clarity on something you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Is Union Pier a development project or an infrastructure project for your district?
Well, I mean, look, I view it as both, right? Okay. I mean, we're taking away it's a development project in that, yes, I mean, the private developers, Ben Navarro is developing it, but it's creating infrastructure in terms of parking and in terms of, walking traffic, and it's taking away it's taking away the cruise lines, as we had mentioned, right? So, I mean, it's going to create some maritime traffic in certain ways and alleviate that. So I view it as a little bit of both. I have a broad view of infrastructure.
And quickly, I want to go to obviously what you mentioned earlier about the permitless carry bill. Obviously, South Carolina Governor McMaster signed that bill into law a couple of months ago, allowing adults to carry loaded handguns openly with no permit or training. Adults 18 plus who can legally possess guns can now openly carry them with no permit or prior training. Do you believe in your mind, John, that this bill affirms Second Amendment rights rather than the expansions of it?
I think this bill goes too far. I am a Second Amendment supporter. I believe that every single person that hasn't shown a reason that they shouldn't have a gun should be able to have a gun, should be able to protect themselves. Now, look, I am focused on keeping the guns out of the hands of the wrong people. And I know the majority of the public agrees with me that if you want to have a firearm, you should have certain common sense gun control or gun safety measures should be put in place. We should close the Charleston loophole. We should put in place automatic background checks. I also don't believe that that this is so much an expansion of gun rights, but as you said, more of an affirmation of them to show just it's a lot of it is a show vote just to show how pro-gun some of these individuals are. But I do find it kind of ironic that those that call themselves pro-life are undoubtedly making our streets more dangerous with this bill. So I mean it's been a sad day, sad year, or sad 2 years in South Carolina in terms of the two bills that have to do with public safety and freedom, the two big ones. But look, that's what I want to get up there and change.
Since this bill has actually been signed into law, how much has gun crime decreased in the House District 110 area?
How much has gun crime decreased?
Yes, sir.
It hasn't.
Where's the crime happening the most with guns?
Sorry?
Where exactly is the crime happening the most in your district with guns?
I don't know specifically which part of town or which part of the district the most gun crime is happening in. But when you look at the raw numbers, crime hasn't decreased because of the open carry bill. And in fact, I'd be willing to bet that I'm not willing to bet because I don't want to bet on something like this, but it would stand to reason that because of this bill, because of the ease that somebody with a troubled history of either violence or mental illness could get a gun without a permit, that violence would actually uptick. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but we just don't have the measures in place to stop something like that right now.
What raw numbers have you seen because of this bill?
It's too early to tell, but
okay.
I mean, across the board,
yes,
you
sir.
can look at states and districts across the country, and those that have higher gun control laws without the preemption of the state, they do better from a gun control standpoint, from a crime standpoint.
Yeah, and now that carrying openly is obviously legal, how would anybody actually know who's a convicted felon or not,
right,
who's legally carrying a registered gun?
Well, look, Quintin, this is the problem, right? So, like I said, an 18-year-old, can walk down King Street with a gun in his or her hands, and the only time it becomes illegal is when they start to raise it at somebody. And what are you going to do? Call the cops at that point? Because the police response is, well, very good. I think average time's about 2.5, 3 minutes, but it doesn't take that long for a bullet for a trigger to be pulled and a bullet to start flying through the air. And so, there's nothing. you can't. There's no way you can tell somebody walking down the street if they are a convicted felon, if they're a dangerous person. And I think that a dangerous person is more likely to just say, "No, I'm here for public safety," before they're going to do something bad. So, yeah, I mean, look, it's an unfortunate law, and it's something that I look forward to changing and addressing.
Okay, adjusting. Well, should this bill have expunged those who have been arrested or given police records for carrying weapons without a permit?
Yeah, I believe so. But it's that's how backwards our legislature is right now, right? It's if you're going to have it one way, they want their cake and eat it too. So, but it's just not. But this bill should never have been brought in the first place. So, I think that now that it's happened, right? I mean, that now that it's happened, like all we can do is focus on reining back in the gun safety laws before something bad happens.
And just a footnote, the Bureau of Protective Services, an arm of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety, reminds the public that the passage of the constitutional carry is still illegal under the new law to carry guns into places where you couldn't carry them before, including schools, courthouse, and the state house, of course. Mm-hmm. So why didn't they just not lift those particular restrictions with this particular bill?
Yeah, I find it ironic that when you go up to the state house, you see no concealed carry or no, I forget what it is. Maybe it just says no guns on the grounds when it's those who passed the law. I also find it sad that, when you're walking around Charleston and you're outside of business and you see a tourist walking by and the business says, please no firearms on the window. It's somebody, people are shocked. They think that we're living in, the Wild West or something like that. And the reality is that we are, because, we have a world where people who are dangerous can carry guns in South Carolina. And again, that's just not something I want to stand for.
John Moffett, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to talking to you again one time.
Likewise.